The Archbishop of Canterbury is no longer first among equals amongst his fellow archbishops and bishops, but did he create his own downfall? Hi, welcome to the channel. My name is Rev Dan. I'm a vicar in the Church of England. So when I was watching some of the interviews from GAFCON last week, one interview or something in one of the interviews really struck me. It was Archbishop James Wong from the Primate of the Indian Ocean, also very luckily Bishop of the Seychelles. What a role to be called to. He talked about reaching out to the Archbishop of Canterbury because of the persecution his church was going to suffer, or was suffering, because of the homosexuality issue. Anyway, this is what he's had to say.
The Anglican Communion is being bullied by people of the world. You know, the Archbishop of Canterbury, I had a problem within my province. We were being attacked as being a church of homosexuals. So I brought this concern to the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he said to me, "You tell them I have nothing to do with homosexuality, and the Anglican Church will never accept, he will never accept anything to do with homosexuals." And then at the General Synod, he approved with other bishops the amendment for the blessing of people homosexual living in marriage life, in partnership. So there is a dichotomy between what he told me to tell the people in Madagascar and what he did later at the General Synod in England.
Do you think that he thinks that the people in Madagascar don't read the newspapers?
Well, I don't know. We have to ask him.
Yeah.
But it is.
I mean, it does seem astonishing to say something to your face,
yeah,
and then say something publicly the opposite.
The opposite, exactly the opposite.
So the Archbishop there stated that he had this conversation with Justin Welby to ask for his support in this issue that's going on in his province. And what we have to take here is that this is a conversation between two people. We don't know exactly what that conversation was. There could be some nuances, there could be some misunderstandings. We just don't know fully what was said. The struggle here is that we got two Christians speaking, but again, let's just add there hasn't been a response from Justin Welby on this, so we don't know his side of the story. But we still have two Christians, and they both can't lie in this situation. But this is what is leading me to have a look at some of this in the bigger scope of things with Archbishop Justin Welby and the Worldwide Anglican Communion, and the struggle that he is having or had because the Anglican Communion is splitting, trying to keep it together as the leader of the Anglican Communion, as the first amongst equals, and being called into this role. And what a difficult role that he was called into, with same-sex blessings and marriage being talked about during his tenure, and that he just really, it feels like he just wanted to keep it together, but it's in doing that he hasn't been able to walk that line. It's a tight line to write. So we can see by him just saying this that he wanted to keep the Anglican Communion together as long as possible. Finally, a short comment on my own thinking. I'm very conscious that the Archbishop of Canterbury is to be a focus of unity and an instrument of the communion. That is a priority. Truth and unity must be held together, but church history also says that this sometimes takes a very long time to reach a point where different teaching is rejected or received. I neither have nor do I seek the authority to discipline or exclude a church of the Anglican Communion. I will not do so. I may comment in public on occasions, but that is all. We are a communion of churches, not a single church. Is that a cop-out? What do you think? But he wanted people to stay together. But here's another response from Archbishop James Wong in that same interview about walking together, and what the Archbishop Justin Welby was calling for just wasn't ever going to happen.
In Lambeth, the Archbishop of Canterbury always said, all the bishops, all the people attending Lambeth, we are walking together. And I remember in an interview I gave during Lambeth, I said, we are not walking together. Not only we are not walking together, we can't work together.
Yeah.
There, James Wong is saying that not only can we walk together, we can't work together. So from the outset, what Archbishop Justin Welby was trying to do was never going to work. But this is all based around same-sex blessing, same-sex marriage, and especially the Church of England in the General Synod voting in favour of same-sex blessings. But more importantly, that the Archbishop of Canterbury, in saying all that he said, and we'll get into that in a couple of more things, he voted for same-sex blessings. So Archbishop Dustin Badi Arama of South Sudan told journalists, a communion is where you have one belief, one doctrine, and here there is an issue where there are two different doctrines. How can we walk together? Just to add to Archbishop Wong's comments. So let's look at the General Synod. Here's a video of a General Synod member talking about the Anglican Communion, about the dangers, and Archbishop Welby's response. Just as a little caveat, in my previous video I did get things mixed up, but the context was still fine on that. You can watch that video here. So let's have a look at what happened at General Synod and Justin Welby's response. But remember, in his response he then voted for same-sex blessings to happen in the Church of England.
I posed a question to the Archbishop of Canterbury in this group of sessions about the LLF and the Anglican Communion. And in his response, he said this, and I quote, "The Anglican Communion of the 42 provinces are independent, autonomous, but also interdependent. And if we are really interdependent on each other, we must think of what the impact of what we do in one house will have on others. We are throwing a stone into the pond of the Anglican Communion without thinking of the ripple effect. And I'll tell you one. Last November, I was in Nigeria with my diocesan bishop on a mission trip. But one of the challenges in Nigeria, I'm sure Synod would have heard about the word Boko Haram. Boko Haram means everything Western is forbidden and must be persecuted. And Boko Haram sees churches and Christians as elements and agents of Westernization. Synod, if we go along without thinking of the repercussions of what we are doing, we are throwing our brothers and sisters, not just in Nigeria, but in other places around the world where they are in the minority, we are throwing them under the bus. But not just that alone, friends. Synod, we are putting a nail into the coffin of the Anglican Communion. And not just a nail, we are burying it, burning its ashes, and throwing it to the wind.
The differences we have here are small compared to those with many around the communion. This isn't just about listening to the rest of the world, it's caring. Let's just be clear on that. It's about people who'll die, women who'll be raped, children who'll be tortured. So when we vote, we need to think of that. This is not just about what people say, it's what they'll suffer.
I believe that he's really speaking for the heart here. He's not reading anything. It is from the heart. Women will be raped, children will be tortured, people will be killed over this across the Anglican Communion. And so this is why there's a sense of being torn. But I don't think you can walk both lines. You can't vote for something like this and expect the Anglican Communion to come together. So this article comes from the Telegraph, where the headline says, "MPs threaten me over gay marriage," says Archbishop. Justin Welby said he was summoned twice to Parliament and threatened with parliamentary action to force same-sex marriage in the church. So the context was that just after the vote in General Synod on the Sunday, he went to Accra in Ghana for the 18th plenary meeting of the Global Anglican Consultative Council, And the Archbishop said that regarding the growing impact of atheism, that the result is clear. He added, in the last few weeks, as part of our discussions about sexuality and the rules around sexuality in the Church of England, I talked about our interdependence with all Christians, not just Anglicans, particularly those in the global south with faith majorities. As a result, I was summoned to Parliament twice to Parliament and threatened with parliamentary actions to force same-sex marriage on us, called in England equal marriage. When I speak about the impact of the actions by the Church of England will have on those abroad in the Anglican Communion, those concerns were dismissed by many, not all, but by many in the General Synod. Remember, he voted for this motion. He later added, obedience to God comes ahead of loyalty to country. That was not popular when I said it last Monday night to some members of Parliament. Well, it goes on to say in the article, it recently emerged that the Archbishop had a meeting with MPs at the House of Commons last month in which he was reportedly said that he would rather the Church of England lost its privileged status than risk a global split over same-sex marriage, that we become de-established, which would be a good thing, breaking away from state and church. But now we get into the nitty-gritty of this. Ben Bradshaw, the Labour MP for Exeter, who was at the meeting at the end of January, described the Archbishop's speech as extraordinary. Why? This is a speech that he gave to the council. He told the Telegraph, he seems to be claiming to the conservative African churches that the baby steps taken last week to tackle homophobia in the Church of England are being forced on him by Parliament, while telling Anglicans here, the majority of whom support same-sex marriage in church, that he and his fellow bishops can't go further because it would alienate Africans. He also appears to blame the pressure to stop discriminating against gay and lesbian Anglicans on the secularisation of the West, when it is people of faith within the Church of England who are leading the calls for change. I wish the Archbishop would say what he really believed and stick to it, rather than saying different things to different audiences. And I think this is the tightrope that he's walking, but you can't say different things to different audiences, especially in that role. It's so public. Goes on to say in the article, the Archbishop told the audience in Accra that the future of the Anglican Communion must not be dictated by people, blackmailed nor bribed to do what others want us to do. Chris Loder, Conservative MP for West Dorset, added that the fact that the Archbishop claims that MPs threatened him, yet he proceeds to invite the very same attendees to Lambeth Palace a few days prior, suggests otherwise. Well, to be fair to the Archbishop, if he's inviting people before it goes on just days before the meeting of the MPs, the Archbishop had a reception for around 90 parliamentarians for candle mass service in the chapel at Lambeth Palace. Well, that one I would disagree with, because if he's invited people to candle mass a couple of days before, doesn't mean that they're not going to drag him or call him to Parliament to try threaten him to do these things, if that's what's actually happened. So he didn't know at the time of inviting these people to that service that they would do that. Perhaps. I would suggest that the Archbishop and some of his colleagues are politicians wearing a mitre, given his statements over the weekend, Mr. Loder added. The problem we have here with all these, there's no, it feels, I would say, there's no smoke without fire. That what the Archbishop Wong's saying, what these parliamentarians are saying, these MPs, that one thing's being said and then they're hearing opposite things. Or there's one action and then an opposite action, and they're not consistent. Jane Ozaine, who I would agree with on these issues, says of Archbishop Welby, the Archbishop's comments as disingenuous, calculated and totally untrue, adding that he is playing Parliament off against certain parts of the Anglican Communion rather than showing leadership. The article goes on, the Reverend Paul Eddy, spokesman for the Global South Fellowship of Anglican Churches, he was at the time, he isn't anymore, said of the Archbishop's latest comments, sadly Archbishop Welby is up to his old trick. Tell following leaders something which is in their culture means something different to ours, knowing that they don't have independent advisors to explain A Lambeth Palace spokesman said that they were already degrees of fractured communion between some of the churches, and the Archbishop has consistently called on his fellow Anglican primates and bishops to continually walk together to the maximum possible degree despite their deep disagreements on this matter. And we know with that they weren't walking together and they couldn't walk together. Just going back to Paul Eddy's comment saying that he's up to his old trick, suggesting that he's done this before. Tell foreign leaders something which in their culture means something different to ours, knowing that they don't have independent advisors to explain. Again, just to be fair on this, I'm married to a Colombian, been with her for 25 years, married for 23. And, still now culturally, we still learning and trying to understand each other. We brought her from very different cultures. So, as I said earlier in the video, there could be just genuine misunderstanding. We don't know. In all of this, I'm telling one side of the story and we're not hearing off Archbishop Welby. And it'd be great if he could address some of these things because they don't look good. As I said, there's no smoke without fire. You've got an Archbishop in the Anglican Communion saying, I asked him for something and this happened. He then goes, we read the article in the Telegraph saying that he's saying one thing to the African bishops and something else to the Parliament. And so what is happening? I know he's trying to go a tight line here, but now the Anglican Communion has split, and is Justin Welby leading the church, or is he trying to walk a tight line of just trying to keep the church together? What do you think? What's your thoughts? And be fair on this. I think he's an incredibly difficult job, and maybe he isn't doing it well, but he is also a person at the end of the day who needs a lot of prayer.